The next day, Ruth and the others arrived in the city. There, Marius was surprised because he had never been in a city with so many people and asked about the flags. Ruth explained that it was their way of representing clan members. At night, they decided to dress up to go to the dance party. Everyone dressed as best as they could to look elegant, and after a while, they arrived at the place and were impressed because it was very large and worthy of the two best clans in the kingdom. There, many people started arriving and soon noticed Nin and found it strange to see her there. Ruth heard comments about Nin being part of the clan that would soon join them, and it made him feel strange, because they did not consider him a leader or try to calm him, and Marius asked if he could eat what was at the buffet. This distracted Hesto a little, and he relaxed with the others while eating. After a few minutes, the lights went out. Then, the sub-leaders of the clans introduced themselves. They thanked everyone who had come and then called a very special guest. The light spotlighted Nin, who was surprised, and she asked Ruth what she should do. Ruth knew that he had to take on the role of leader, so he decided to take her hand and lead her to the front because he wanted to make it clear that she was part of his clan and that they needed to talk to him first. The sub-leader told Nin that they didn't expect to see her as an adventurer because she was very famous in the world and asked who the man with her was. Ruth stepped forward and answered that he was Ru, the leader of the clan Nin belonged to. The host recognized him and asked if he was not part of the hero group because, if he remembered correctly, he heard the heroes say that the tank they had was useless and he himself received several requests for help sent by Claus. Furthermore, he told Ruth that he was the one who suggested to the heroes to remove the tank from their group because it was completely useless. Then he turned to the audience and said that tanks were unnecessary because they were only useful for protection. Ruth felt very disturbed by these comments, and then the host asked Nin if she didn't want to join his clan. The sub-leader of another clan, who was angry, said that he also wanted to make the same offer, and while the two of them were arguing, Ruth decided to intervene because he said that neither of them would get the girl because she was not only part of his group but also a very close friend, and he had no intention of trading her. The host then asked why he came there. Ruth replied that he came to propose an alliance. Everyone started laughing, and some commented that it was impossible for an unimportant clan to want to ally with one of the largest in the kingdom. The host mocked him because he didn't trust a tank, especially if he was the leader of the clan, so he asked Nin if she was sure she wanted to be with them. The girl shouted yes because Ruth was the strongest tank in the entire kingdom. Ruth then felt motivated and took the microphone, saying to everyone that they came to conquer the city's labyrinth. So they could mock or laugh all they wanted, but they would prove that they were much stronger than all the other groups and would make them regret underestimating them because they would go farther than all the strongest members of their clans. At that moment, Go, the leader of the Black Dragon clan, emerged from the shadows and said that he liked the attitude shown by Ruth. So he warned not to underestimate the newcomers and greeted Ruth, who, upon shaking his hand, felt amazed because he sensed the immense power radiating from him as a leader. Go said that if he could conquer the labyrinth, he would consider forming an alliance. Then he threw the microphone into the air, and from the center of the rune emerged Luzel, the leader of the White Tiger clan. He complained about wanting to be there without being seen but explained that he was also willing to consider an alliance if they managed to conquer the labyrinth. Go then said that they had already secured a promise from them and hoped Ruth would keep his word because he didn't want his hopes to be mere illusions. That night at the inn, Marius approached Ruth because of what he had said at the dance party, which was remarkable. Ruth knew the responsibility he bore, and Marius promised to help as much as he could to fulfill the promises they had made. Then he left to spend the whole year, and Ruth met Nin and Luna. The two girls greeted him, and Nin was very grateful for his protection in front of others. Ruth said it was his duty, and besides, Nin was very important to him. The girls said goodbye and went to rest. Ruth reflected that if he wanted to make the city and his clan prosper, he had to conquer a labyrinth that even the two strongest clans in the kingdom couldn't overcome. But for Ruth, no challenge was impossible when it came to his friends and family. At that moment, he was still contemplating what to do when he was called by Lily, who asked him to come into a room. Ruth stumbled and didn't quite understand why he was needed. Then he realized that Lily was struggling with her dress and couldn't tie it. The girl asked for his help, and Ruth, though a bit embarrassed, decided to assist her. After helping, the girl thanked him, and Ruth planned to leave the room. However, Lily asked him to stay because she wanted to talk to him. She knew that Ruth was now the leader of a clan and had great responsibilities, which impressed her. He had progressed far since leaving the group of heroes and now held an important position, something she could never achieve or even dare to say in front of many people. Ruth asked what her dream was, and Lily explained that her dream wasn't as grand as Ruth's. She wanted to be more independent because she had always been under the protection of her twin sister, Lilia, who had always helped and protected her since childhood. But now that they were adults, Lily felt not as strong as her sister and needed to learn to be independent. Even in battle, she only provided support from afar while Lilia fought the monsters directly. Furthermore, when they merged their bodies, Lilia was the one in control because her sister was not only good at fighting but also used magic. Lily felt a bit bad because she never fought alone and always relied on her sister. Therefore, from now on, she wanted to be more independent. Ruth understood Lily's reasons and promised to help her whenever she needed it because he wanted to assist Lily in achieving her dreams. Lily was very happy to know that Ruth would help her, and while jumping for joy, she slipped and fell on top of Ruth. At that moment, her twin sister, Lilia, entered the room after hearing Ruth's voice, and she was angry upon seeing what happened and decided to take Ruth upstairs to the inn. There, Ruth was worried about what Lilia might do to him, but the girl said that he should relax. If it had been someone else she found in that situation, she would not hesitate to make them pay. But she knew him well enough to know that he didn't want to harm her sister. Instead, she acted that way to get him away from her sister and to talk to him alone. Then she asked if he had ever told him their story. Ruth remembered that on one occasion she said that their parents had abandoned them. Lilia replied that this was not entirely true, their parents often abused them, and they suffered greatly from what they experienced at home. So, they decided to run away from there, and since then, they have never been apart. That's why it is very rare to see Lily talking to a man, because it reminds her of their father. Then she told Ruth that this was why she wanted to talk to him, because one day she wanted to take Lily to a place where she would truly be happy, but in the meantime, she was determined to protect her and keep her safe. Ruth said that it was clear, as he had noticed that Lilia protected Lily very well, and his sister spoke highly of the care Lilia provided. Lilia didn't believe it was entirely true, but Ruth said it indeed was, because no one is perfect, and she couldn't expect to be perfect for her sister. Lilia thanked him for his help and for listening to her. Ruth replied that he would always be their friend, so they could count on him whenever they needed him. The next day, Ruth gathered with all the boys and arrived in the basement. There, they were already awaited by the twins, who told them that they could go straight to the 49th floor because they had already explored the basement and managed to reach that level. So, by using the basement's passage, they could get there immediately. Lilia, on the other hand, explained that she had also analyzed the abilities of the other clans and how they formed their groups. Both groups from those clans had the same distribution, which was 4 attackers and 2 support healers. Ruth understood that they did not have tanks, and the attackers took all the damage. Lilia explained that on those floors, there were monsters with negative abilities, which didn't worry Ruth because he had a healthy body ability that would neutralize any negative effects. Nin knew that it would be a difficult labyrinth, but they all believed they could succeed and thus form an alliance with the other clans. Then they entered the labyrinth, and Ruth began organizing the team, advancing as usual while Leela and Marius would be in charge of attacks. Nin and Luna, on the other hand, would assist with magic. Then Lily asked if she could give commands from the back. Ruth agreed because she would have a better view of the battle, and the others were surprised to see that the girl had more authority than before. They then headed to the 49th floor, where they began to sense the presence of several monsters. Marius explained that whoever was leading this dungeon was very intelligent because this floor was designed to attack adventurers from 2 different angles. While they were talking, 2 giant monsters appeared, and Ruth quickly used his ability to draw them in. The monsters began attacking him with poison effects, but Ruth was immune and took no damage. Lily took this opportunity to use her magic and remove the negative effects. Meanwhile, Marius and Leela were eliminating some giant owls, and Leela then suggested that it would be better to quickly pass through the area without continually eliminating the monsters. Ruth agreed and drew some monsters while the others exited the area. Then Ruth used a flash stone that allowed them to pass through that part of the labyrinth. A few minutes later, they talked about what had happened, praised Leela for her decision, and Nin said that she had discovered something new. Now they could choose whether to use the sacrificial shield provided by Ruth or not. This was quite surprising, but Marius said that it might be due to the previous battle that Ruth's skills had increased. Even so, Marius praised Ruth for his excellent skills because not all tanks had the ability to provoke. Ruth thanked him for the praise, and Marius said that it would be much better if he could learn self-healing abilities. Ruth felt strange because he had never heard of such an ability and didn't even know it existed. Marius said that it was true and strange that humans didn't know about it. Wait, humans? Then Marius asked Ruth the same question because they actually didn't know anything about him or where he came from. The other girls also asked the same question because he was now a member of the group and they wanted to know more. Marius decided to tell them even though he wasn't sure they would believe him because he revealed that he was actually a demonoid. As they should know, in this world there are humans and half-humans, but long ago there were also demonoids. To summarize his story to the group, he explained that they were very similar to half-humans, with the difference being that they made promises to the human gods while the demonoids swore allegiance to demons. That's why the demonoids managed the labyrinths, as they were initially created by demons to try to destroy the human world. Nin was surprised to hear this because she believed that the labyrinths were created by their god to enrich humanity and their villages. Lilia said that this is the legend known by many, but Marius stated that it was not true and warned that there might be a demonoid managing the labyrinths. So, they had to be careful when facing it. Ruth asked how Marius felt knowing that he would be facing one of his own kind. Marius replied that he was not comfortable with what the demonoids were doing. Now that he had seen the human world, he strongly disagreed with the destruction the demonoids wanted to cause. So, this battle would be more personal because of his values. Ruth was pleased to hear this because he also considered Marius a friend, and the other girls felt the same. They then started discussing how to defeat the monsters on that floor. After some time, they managed to get through the labyrinth and eliminate all the monsters, reaching the 50th floor. There, they encountered a skeletal dragon, and Ruth initiated the plan he had agreed upon with Lily, where Ruth would draw the dragon's attention while the others attacked from a distance and avoided its strikes. Lance explained to Marius and Lily that it was better to crush the dragon's bones rather than try to cut them, and also mentioned that the dragon was weak against fire, so if they used that magic, the dragon would weaken faster. Ruth continued to fight the dragon while the others dealt damage. But the dragon made an unexpected move and launched an area attack that poisoned Marius and Lily. Nin and Luna began healing them while Ruth kept fighting the dragon. However, after several attacks, the dragon was not responding well to his provocation abilities. At that moment, the dragon launched a mud attack that seeped into Ruth's shield, making it very heavy. But with Luna's help, he managed to remove the mud. Nin knew this would be a very long fight and decided to activate her unique ability, Santa, which created a zone that restored their lost shields. Thanks to this, they continued fighting, and after an hour, they still couldn't defeat the dragon. The dragon was weaker than before, and Ruth knew it. But the dragon began preparing a fire attack that Lily had warned would happen when the dragon had little life left. The girls thought to protect themselves, but Ruth stepped forward and blocked most of the damage with his shield. Ruth taunted the dragon, saying it wouldn't be defeated easily, and then used provocation, successfully stopping the dragon's attack, which had severely damaged his shield. Because of this, he decided to restore his shield in Nin's zone while the other group members attacked one by one using their abilities and magic. After restoring his shield, Ruth jumped towards the dragon and used all the damage he had taken during the fight to deliver a blow with his vital conversion ability, finally defeating the dragon. After the battle was over, the girls suggested that it was enough for the day because they had exceeded their limits and decided to return to the village. Lily said that they could sell everything left behind by the dragon to show that they had gone further than other clans, and Ruth agreed. Then congratulated Lily for leading the group well and proposed celebrating their victory. Everyone was excited, but Leela commented that she wouldn't go because she was very tired and needed to rest. Lily realized something was going on with her sister, so she decided to accompany her while Ruth watched the two sisters leave, knowing something was wrong. Some time later, Ruth celebrated with Nin and Luna their victory in the labyrinth. They ate there, and Nin drank alcohol, which made Luna curious since she had never tried it before. Ruth was also surprised because he had never seen Nin drink alcohol before. There had been talk of a homunculus being interested in drinking alcohol, but at Luna's insistence, who wanted to try, he decided to let the homunculus drink a little because he didn't believe it would be harmful. However, Luna regretted giving it a big gulp because it tasted very bitter. Nin laughed because it was natural for her not to like it, but she promised that over time and with more drinking, the taste would get better. Then, the girl changed the topic and asked Ruth why he had been closer to Lily and her sister lately. Ruth was surprised by the question, and Luna confirmed it because she had also seen that Ruth was now closer to the two girls. Ruth explained that they were just colleagues and he wanted to thank them for helping without being part of the clan. Nin was pleased to hear that they were just colleagues and asked Ruth if he didn't want the two of them to be more than just friends. Ruth felt embarrassed by the question and thought that the alcohol was starting to affect him. Nin laughed, and Ruth replied that he hadn't thought about it because, as he had said before, he was focused on his mission with the clan and for now wasn't thinking about relationships. Nin understood but hoped that once everything was settled, they could start something. Luna, on the other hand, admitted that she also felt warmth in her chest when spending time with Ruth, so she wanted to get closer to him and have a stronger friendship. Ruth began to feel embarrassed by the girl's suggestions and, after a few awkward moments, decided to go to his room to rest and be alone for a while. However, upon entering, he saw Leela asleep in her bed. No one expected it, but it turned out she was in bed and everyone had been looking for her. How lucky Ruth was, he called the girl and she woke up. Then, she explained that she had come to talk to Ruth but had fallen asleep due to exhaustion. So, she asked what Ruth thought about her sister's attitude in the labyrinth. Ruth admitted that he was very surprised by how the girl could behave and take over leadership. Although it should have been something logical because, as twins, they were supposed to have similar strengths, even if not in the same aspects. Leela understood and was happy to see her sister improving. But deep down she felt a little afraid and asked Ruth if the change was good. Ruth replied that it was natural to be afraid of change. He himself also wondered if all the changes happening in his city were good because many of the long-time residents believed that everything would be better if the city were like it used to be and wouldn't have so many problems. However, Ruth also knew that things wouldn't have improved if it weren't for those changes. Leela understood and admitted that deep down she felt weaker than her sister, but all this time she had to be strong and not show weakness so her sister would have great confidence in her. Despite her sister's behavior today, she was proud but also felt a little scared. She feared that her sister would decide to become independent and drift apart, leaving the bond they had built over the years. Ruth said that this wouldn't happen because they were both very close, and no matter what changed within them, it wouldn't be enough to separate them. He was very sure of this, and Leela was very grateful for his advice because she felt much more confident and had no intention of leaving or letting her sister be alone. Ruth wished her the best and finally lay down to rest. The next day, they returned to the dungeon and prepared to journey to the 51st floor. The twins explained that no one had managed to get past that level, and what little they knew was that there was a very thick fog that prevented them from detecting enemies. Then Ruth gave instructions, and they went to that level. Upon arriving there, Ruth and the others realized they couldn't see more than a few meters ahead. Moreover, Lily's detection magic wasn't working, and Ruth asked Luna to use wind magic to try to clear the fog. However, Luna's magic didn't work, and Marius was convinced that it was some kind of mana spell that prevented them from clearing it. So, he proposed detecting the mana source to find the monster's positions. Ruth tried and felt several presences, although he couldn't pinpoint them exactly. He only knew that something was approaching from the front and decided to use provocation. Then, a water attack hit his shield, which surprised him a bit. Then some mud-shaped hands tried to grab them, and Leela said she knew what kind of monster it was. Ruth refocused and sensed several presences. He then asked the girls to move slightly because the enemies were trying to surround them while he used provocation again. This caused the saga monster to appear in front of him, wielding a trident. Additionally, two other monsters emerged from behind, and Ruth managed to block one of the attacks. But as the second monster attacked him, Marius emerged from the ground to defeat it. Thus, after a while, they all managed to defeat the Saiyans together because they used the technique that Marius had taught them, which was to concentrate on detecting monsters based on the mana they used, and they succeeded in passing that level. A while later, they decided to take a short rest, and the girls began preparing food with the meat of the monsters they had defeated. Meanwhile, Ruth checked all the artifacts left by the monsters. Then Lilia approached to inspect as well and told Ruth that thanks to the conversation they had the night before, she felt much better and was able to talk to her sister without any issues. Ruth was glad they were okay, and after eating, they decided to proceed to the next level. When they arrived, they found themselves inside a very large cave, but there were no signs of any monsters. At that moment, a rune appeared on the ground, and from it emerged a dark skeleton. Everyone was shocked, but they were even more astonished when they saw that the skeleton had 3 orbs around it, 1 yellow, 1 blue, and 1 red. This made them feel uneasy, and Ruth sensed a very strong presence emanating from the monster. However, he still decided to initiate an attack as the tank to provoke it while he ordered Lily to lead from the rear. Then, the skeleton focused its attention on Ruth, who attacked it, but the yellow orb activated and created a shield that blocked all attacks. Ruth was surprised and knew that he would not be able to break the shield. As he considered retreating, the red orb activated and unleashed a burst of fire. Ruth protected himself and did not fully understand what was happening. Then, the monster used the blue orb and began moving much faster. Ruth managed to block and dodge the attacks, and he realized that each orb provided a different ability. The yellow orb served as a tank, the red orb used attack magic, and the blue orb was used for support magic. Then, he provoked the monster again, and while the monster faced him, Marius and Lilia attacked from behind. However, the skeleton used a magic shield to block their attacks while stopping Ruth with its 2 swords. At that moment, the skeleton glowed and launched a blinding light attack. When its effect ended, Ruth asked if everyone was okay, but Marius informed him that Leela was acting strangely. The girl was angry and attacked Marius, ordering him not to hurt her sister. In Leela's consciousness, she had memories of how her father tortured her, beat them, and she tried her best to protect her younger sister even though they were still very small and couldn't do much. Rage took over Leela, who kept fighting. Ruth asked Nin to heal her, but the girl replied that Luna and Lily were also affected. Ruth understood that only Nin, Marius, and himself were unaffected due to their resistance. Then, using Vital Conversion, he attacked the skeleton and managed to disable its magic shield briefly, throwing it against the wall. Ruth asked Marius to handle the skeleton while he tried to protect Leela. Marius complied, and Ruth decided to provoke Leela. Then, he grabbed Leela's hand and brought her to the ground. Leela, lying on the ground, kept screaming not to hurt her younger sister. Ruth recalled what Leela had revealed a few days ago about how their father treated them and understood that she was experiencing a flashback to her childhood. So, he said that they were her friends and no one would hurt them again. Leela began to calm down, and Ruth kept talking, trying to reassure her. The girl saw Ruth appearing in her memory and reached out her hand. By holding that hand, she managed to come out of her confusion. Ruth was glad he succeeded and promised not to let anyone hurt them like before. Leela was very grateful and stood up. Ruth asked Marius to return because Leela was okay now, and Marius explained that they had to eliminate the magic shield in a certain way, otherwise it would be impossible to defeat the skeleton. Ruth planned to attack it, but the skeleton launched another fire attack. Ruth blocked it and asked for Nin's help, who cast a water spell to give him more resistance to fire. Ruth approached the skeleton, but its shield stopped him. Then he saw a drop of water from Nin's spell manage to penetrate the shield and hit the skeleton, so he told the others that this was its weakness because the shield couldn't withstand both physical and magical attacks simultaneously. They decided to try, and when Ruth activated the skeleton's shield, they used their magic to injure it. They began attacking in different ways, successfully weakening it little by little. Nin, Luna, and Lily used their magic to trap it with 3 different elements. The skeleton tried using its magic again to confuse them, but Nin cast a spell to prevent it. She realized that the yellow orb was shining too brightly, meaning the monster would try to create a large barrier to escape. Ruth ran towards the monster, determined not to let it do that, and Nin warned him that he would take damage from the spells. Ruth replied that he would use that damage to apply it in his vital conversion attack and successfully slammed the skeleton into the wall. The monster began to weaken but used a spell to create clones. Now, the 2 skeletons attack Ruth, who asks Marius and Leela to handle one of them. Luna assists them with her magic, and together they manage to defeat the clone. Ruth pursues the other skeleton as it tries to flee, attacking it with his shield, gradually breaking the skeleton's magical defenses. He then calls on Marius and Leela for a final strike. The 2 children comply, successfully defeating the monster, which dissipates and leaves behind a gem on the ground. Ruth picks it up, delighted that they have overcome the boss at this level. He asks Lily to find the portal out of there, but she returns surprised to report that there is no portal. Confused, Ruth asks Marius if he understands what is happening. Marius, too, is unsure about the Labyrinth Keeper's intentions but suspects that the skeleton was its finest creation. Now defeated, the Keeper might fear them, possibly explaining why it blocked their way forward by obscuring the moon. Though Ruth doesn't fully grasp why it did so, he suggests they may need to find another route through the underground journey. Suddenly, a girl appears behind Ruth, commenting that they shouldn't leave so soon because there's still much to be done. She bites Ruth's neck and disappears. Moments later, she reappears before them, exuding immense power. 4 more skeletons materialize around them, causing concern as they cannot combat so many at once. The girl, angry that more skeletons appeared, swiftly destroys all 4 with a single attack. Ruth becomes more worried, realizing she possesses overwhelming power. Unexpectedly, he learns that the Labyrinth Keeper is actually a demon king. The Keeper casts a curse, but thanks to Nin's protection blessing, they remain unaffected. The Keeper grows slightly angry, especially when Ruth shows no fear. Ruth remarks that he actually finds the girl quite cute, which amuses her greatly. Marius warns Ruth that despite her appearance, the girl is actually over 300 years old. Enraged, the Keeper attacks Marius with magic, but Ruth shields him, emphasizing that Marius is his friend. The girl was surprised and told Marius that it was ironic because the failure of the Demon Kings eventually allied with humans. Marius replied that he hated the Demon Kings and that's why he didn't support them. The girl disregarded what was said and reminded them that no one could match the power of the Demon Kings. Ruth replied that it was indeed true, and perhaps humans didn't have enough power to defeat them individually, but that was because they were a group, and in this way ordinary humans managed to defeat the entire labyrinth. The girl was not surprised by what Ruth said and challenged him to try to defeat her, Guardian Ammon, and show how brave he was. The girl's body began to radiate a lot of mana and her power increased. Luna realized what was happening and started to feel afraid. Ruth decided to step forward first and use provocation. The Guardian attacked him and Ruth managed to withstand its attack. Then everyone else from the group tried to attack it one by one, but the girl was so strong that they couldn't harm her. Moreover, she easily dispelled their magic. Ruth was surprised to learn that his provocation ability did not affect her as the Guardian attacked the others. They tried again, but the girl mocked them because they wouldn't be able to hurt her that way. Nevertheless, Nin managed to make her stumble after dispelling the wind magic. Ruth then devised a plan and used provocation again. At that moment, the girls used fire attacks to strike her from behind, while Ruth threw glittering stones that blinded the Guardian. Marius and Lily seized this opportunity to cut it with their swords. The Guardian began to emit excessive mana and its power broke free in the form of a tornado. It was furious for underestimating them, but now they would know its true power. Ruth and the others gathered around Nin, who used healing spells on them. They discussed the Guardian and realized that it would be more difficult to defeat it compared to any other monster they had faced. Nevertheless, everyone was motivated to defeat it because they were not just an ordinary group. Marius said that this would be the perfect opportunity to defeat the Demon Kings, and everyone promised to give their best to defeat the Guardian. At that moment, the tornado disappeared and they saw a giant Fenrir that with just one roar disturbed the entire group. Ruth was amazed and asked Marius if he could also transform into such a beast to fight. Marius replied that he could, but wouldn't be able to distinguish between friend and foe. Ruth understood and stepped forward to face the wolf's attack, while Marius and the others tried to harm them, but even though they tried to cut or cast various types of magic, they couldn't hurt Fenrir even with a scratch. Ruth continued to use provocation and withstand increasingly fierce attacks, so they knew she would be harder to defeat than any monster they had ever faced. Nevertheless, everyone was motivated to succeed in defeating it because they were not just an ordinary group. Part of them believed that this was the perfect opportunity to eliminate the Demon Kings, and everyone promised to give their best to defeat the Guardian at that time. The tornado disappeared and was replaced by a gigantic Fenrir, whose roar alone managed to unsettle the entire group. Ruth asked Marius if he could also transform into such a creature to fight. Marius replied that he could, but he wouldn't be able to distinguish between friend and foe. Ruth understood and moved forward to confront the wolf's attacks, blocking the strikes directed at him, while Marius and the others attempted to harm it. Despite their efforts with various types of magic, they couldn't scratch Fenrir. Ruth continued to use a provocation strategy to deflect increasingly powerful blows while trying to devise a plan. However, Marius then appeared after concentrating for a more deadly attack. This time, he managed to wound the wolf, causing it to flee and leaving Lossos confused. Nin decided to cast a spell to prevent confusion from the roar and asked Ruth to protect her. Ruth agreed, and together with Lily and Marius, they began to attack the wolf. They succeeded in gradually injuring it, and Ruth noticed the wolf starting to slow down, which was a good sign. At this moment, runes on Fenrir's head glowed, creating a protective wind around it. Marius didn't notice and attempted to attack, but was thrown back with great force. Ruth understood it was a protective shield activated to minimize damage, and believed that disabling it would increase their chances of defeating the monster. Nin mentioned a spell to remove the shield but said it would take time. Ruth and the others agreed to give her the time she needed, and they began to divert the wolf's attention. It was tougher for Ruth, who also had to endure the damage caused by the wind shield on his body, finding it difficult to breathe. However, he was determined to stop the attacks. After a few minutes, Nin completed the spell and deactivated the shield. At that moment, Marius and Lilia took advantage to inflict wounds in several places. Ruth ran beneath the wolf and used orbital conversion to restore over 30,000 points of damage he had taken earlier. But the monster began to rise, and magical runes appeared beneath it. Ruth saw it was preparing a magical attack but knew he had no time to escape, as the attack was incredibly powerful. He resolved to defend himself while his shield was deactivated, fearing that losing it could even cost him his life. Moments later, the attack ceased. Nin and the two girls approached him, and at that moment, they saw Marius and Lilia lying on the ground, both severely injured but still holding on.